Yubel Sacred Beast Exodia. This is Sealed Nightmare, my new redone version of the Yubel Exodia deck, which I did before in Master Duel. Now, if you want to see this deck in action, be sure to click the card above. But without further ado, let's get right into the deck profile. So this is basically an Exodia deck that runs the new Yubel cards, which makes it even more fantastic than it was before, as well as a Sacred Beast engine for the extra draw and search power. So let's go straight into it. Starting off, we of course have the 5 pieces of the Forbidden One. Left, right, head, that. Obviously, one of each, since they're limited, so you can only have one of each, and you only need one of each. Next, we have our Yubel engine. We start off with 1 copy of Yubel Terra Incarnate, 1 copy of the original Yubel, and 3 copies of Spirit of Yubel. The reason we run 3 of Spirit of Yubel is because, firstly, she can special summon herself. Secondly, she has a search effect, which obviously thins out the deck and is great for Exodia. We only need 1 copy of each of the others because we don't often really go into them. We're not trying to go into them, and you don't really go past Terra Incarnate. Of course, with the new Yubel support, which didn't show up in my deck showcase video because the new cards, being the Field Spell and Grave Squirmer, hadn't come out when I made that video, but the deck runs pretty much the same, if not slightly better now. In that case, you might want to put in the Ultimate Nightmare, but you don't really need it since this isn't a heavy Yubel deck, this is an Exodia deck. So next up we have 1 copy of Senkara D Lotus, which has recently had its name changed on YGO Omega. That's great. This card special summons our Spirit of Yubel, so it's obviously one of the main cards in the deck. I used to run 3 of this card, but now I have swapped out 2 of them for Infernal Grave Squirmer and 2 copies of Nightmare Throne. Infernal Grave Squirmer is really good for Yubel. It gets another special summon out. It helps her, destroy her so we can search more Yubels from the deck and continually thinning our deck out. And it gives us just more access to link summons as well. Nightmare Throne is really fantastic for this deck. Not only can this card add any of our Yubel monsters to our hand, which is great, it can also add most of our Sacred Beast support, which is really fantastic. Our Beckoning Beast and our Summoning Beast are all fiend monsters with 0 attack and defense, thus they meet the requirement for Nightmare Throne, so that really helps thin out the deck. It starts off both of our strategies by adding either Senkara Lotus or Dark Beckoning Beast to the hand, or destroying Spirit of Yubel in our deck to get that going as well. This card is really fantastic addition to the deck and works perfectly. Next, for our Yubel engine, we have 2 copies of Nightmare Pain. This is another starter. We can destroy a Yubel in our hand to special summon a Yubel, and it also adds more Yubel cards to our hand, thus thinning our deck for Exodia. This card also allows us to deal damage when we attack with one of our Yubel monsters, which is just another bonus and another win con for us. Next up, we have one of the main cards in the deck, Mature Chronicle. This card has 5 effects. The main ones we're going to be focused on are the first 3. Its first effect special summons Yubel from the graveyard, which is always good, very handy for combos. Its second effect is its most important one for this deck. Add 1 of your banished cards to your hand. This card can be used to search and get back our Exodia that's been banished either by its third effect, by Mature Chronicle's third effect, which banishes a card from the deck. We can banish Exodia to add it back next turn, or by the effect of our Pot of Desires or Allure of Darkness. With these cards, we can banish Exodia from our hand and deck and then bring it back later with Mature Chronicle to complete the Forbidden One. Finally, for our Yubel support, we have 1 copy of Eternal Favorite and 2 copies of Super Polymerization. Eternal Favorite can be searched, so you only need 1 copy of it, and Super Poly, you don't need 3 of them. You can get it, it can be searched, it's very easy to get in your hand since we have so many draw spells. We're not going to go into 3 of them, we're going to go into 2 at most, so this works out very well, and of course we have the best Super Poly target in the game in the form of Yubel. So the Yubel strategy runs basically as it would normally. Get out Yubel and use her to deal damage or go into rank 10s or just control the field with Super Poly. Very simple, very effective. She also can, with Nightmare Pain's effect, protect our Sacred Beast support. Now let's go into the Sacred Beast engine. We have 1 copy of Haman, Lord of Striking Thunder. I only run 1 Sacred Beast because we only really need 1. We get 1 out, and that's like, he's either a level 10, which we can use for a link summon, or he's just a 4,000 body to hit our opponent with. and we only need one for the use of Fallen Paradise, so having one copy of Haman is all we need. I choose to run Haman because I like his effect. While this card is in defense position, monsters your opponent controls cannot target other monsters for attacks except this one. I like that. It works well with the Sacred Beast support, especially if you go into it with Chaos Summoning Beast. Haman can then protect our Dark Beckoning Beast, which is nice. If you want to swap that out for Raviel instead, that would also be a good addition to this deck, as Raviel's effect can special summon tokens to your field, which is nice. But I just personally prefer Haman's effect as well as this extra damage effect for the OTK when needed. Next up, we have one copy of Dark Summoning Beast to special summon Haman straight from our deck, one copy of Chaos Summoning Beast to special summon Haman from our hand, and also to add our field spell to the hand. We have 2 copies of Dark Beckoning Beast. Again, this card we use to search for opening of the Spirit Gates, which we have 2 copies of, or vice versa, and then use whichever one you just added to grab one of the other 2 cards, whatever you need. Finally, for our Sacred Beast support, we have 1 copy of Fallen Paradise. Fallen Paradise is very easy to search in this deck, either with the effect of Dark Beckoning Beast or with Chaos Summoning Beast, and it is one of the main reasons why we put Exodia in this deck. Fallen Paradise's effect not only gives protection to our Sacred Beast, but it also allows us to draw 2 cards each turn as long as we have a Sacred Beast on the field. That makes Fallen Paradise a once per turn Pot of Greed, which is really good for any Exodia deck. Next up, we have our draw engine. So we run a small danger engine in the form of 1 Nessie, 1 Mothman, 1 copy of Chupacabra, 1 Tsuchinoko, and 1 Jackalope. I would rather run more of these, but of course they're limited, so 1 of each works well. You don't want to have double ups because otherwise, that could counteract with their effects. If you reveal one and then your opponent picks the other one, that still counts as not revealing a different card. So we only run 1 of each of these dangers, and I chose these dangers because these are the best ones for either special summoning monsters to the field with the effects of Jackalope and Tsuchinoko, or special summoning to the field with the effects of Jackalope, Tsuchinoko, or Chupacabra. We want to have special summons on the field so that, of course, we can go into Skull Dread later on, or these 2 effects to help thin out the deck, with Nessie adding a danger to our hand, or with Mothman allowing us to draw a card anyway, even if he gets discarded. So these are the 5 dangers that I chose. These are the best ones. Next up, we have 3 copies of Allure of Darkness. This deck is filled with dark monsters. It has, 22 dark monsters in this deck. All of the monsters in this deck are dark, so we should always have targets for Allure, making it basically a pot of greed. And like I said before, we can even banish our Exodia pieces and bring them back later with Mature Chronicle. Next up, we have 1 copy of Card Destruction. This is one of the best draw cards in the game, hence why it's limited. This card can allow us to draw perhaps up to 5, even 6 cards. If we get really lucky, you probably shouldn't have 6 cards in your hand by this point, but still, this card can allow us to draw a lot of cards and without really losing much. If any of our Yubel pieces go to the graveyard, we can very easily bring them back with either Grave Squirmer or just with their own effects, or even with opening of the Spirit Gates can be used to bring back Yubel as well. If we lose any of our Beckoning Beasts or Summoning Beasts, ideally we should be summoning these first anyway, so any extra copies that we have, by that point you already have Haman on the field, so you don't really need them. And if you lose your Exodia parts, then you can bring them back with Backup Soldier. Just keep in mind that you will not be able to bring back the head of Exodia if it's in your graveyard, so watch out for that. That's the only thing that I wouldn't discard with Card Destruction. Next up, finally for our draw engine, we have 2 copies of Pot of Desires. Draw 2, banish 10, easily thins out the deck for Exodia, gets you 2 cards, really great card, and of course, any card that gets banished, even if it's Exodia, can be brought back with Mature Chronicle. Finally, for our main deck, we run 1 copy of Backup Soldier, just to bring back our normal Exodia parts. It can bring back 3 normal monsters from your graveyard and makes it a lot easier to get Exodia into your hand. Alright, that's it for the main deck. Next, let's take a look at the extra deck. First, we have 2 copies of Yubel, which has now been renamed to Yubel the Loving Defender Forever. Great, I like that. That's kind of cool. This is the ultimate target for Super Polymerization. With this card, you can fuse Yubel with Super Poly or Eternal Favorite and fuse all of your opponent's effect monsters as well as any other effect monsters on the board. Yubel the Loving Defender is a fantastic card. you just gotta have it. And we run 2 because you never know, you could definitely go into 2 with this deck. Next we have 1 copy of Garura, Wings of Resonant Life. This is another fairly decent super poly target that doesn't need Yubel, so we can use 2 of our opponent's monsters and just use their monsters, which is great. And this card also, if it's sent to the graveyard, allows us to draw 1 card, which works with Exodia. Next up, we have a card that I don't really see that often, but I thought it was very fitting for this deck, or at least it works. X-Tox Hydra. This card is quite interesting, but it's mainly here again as a super poly target. This card requires 2 monsters you control, wait, 2 monsters you control. Oh, I didn't see the you control bit. No wonder nobody uses this. This is a terrible super poly target. I'm taking that out. Alright, so that is all for our fusion monsters. Next up we have our Xyz monsters. We run a very small rank 10 engine, obviously with the trains. Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon, Juggernaut Liebe, the OTK Machine, and Gustav Max for the extra 2,000 damage. These 2 cards, fantastic. We have a bunch of level 10s. You should always pretty much be able to summon this guy, so that's no problem. Next up for our Link monsters, we first run 3 copies of Saryuja Skulldread. This card works fantastically with your dangers. They very easily get 4 cards on the field. You want to summon this card using 4 cards in order to get its final effect, which will allow you to draw 4 cards, then place 3 cards from your hand on the bottom of the deck in any order. This card is fantastic for Exodia, allowing us to draw 4 cards, thinning out our deck. Well, not so much thinning out our deck, but you know, we put the cards on the bottom, so it technically counts as thinning out the deck, and just getting 4 cards in the hand makes it very easy to draw into Exodia. You can very easily go into multiple copies of Skulldread in 1 turn with this deck, as we have dangers for special summons, we have Yubels for special summons, especially with the new Grave Squirmer and Nightmare Throne, makes it very easy to get multiple copies of Yubel on the field. And of course we have Opening of the Spirit Gates for a special summon. We just got a lot of cards for special summoning and getting a bunch of monsters out, so Skulldread is no problem. Definitely want them at 3 for the Exodia cards. Next up we have 1 copy of Underworld Goddess of the Closed World, our resident kaiju. Basically, she eats an opponent's monster, which is great to summon her, and she has other effects, which is fantastic. We have 1 copy of Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess for the negation effects, 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn and Nightmare Phoenix for their destruction, 1 copy of Macraka from the Underworld. This card I like to have in Yubel decks, as she has the effect to special summon a fiend monster from your graveyard by discarding a card, which is very, very nice. Finally, we have 1 copy of SP Little Knight and 1 copy of IP Masquerena. These cards are just fantastic disruption cards, same with the Nightmares if you're using Masquerena, and they're very easy to go into with the new Yubel support. So that is all there is for this deck. There's not really much else to go into. We could go into this sort of, it's not a side deck, it's just cards that I used to have or tested out. Ultimate Nightmare, we never really went into it, but now that we have the new field spell, it's definitely feasible to go into. I wouldn't say it was a bad thing to have Ultimate Nightmare in the main deck. Same with Foolish Burial, especially now with Grave Squirmer. And we can also dump our Chaos Summoning Beast, so I would definitely include a Foolish Burial as well. I just didn't know what to swap it out for. You could swap out a Spirit of Yubel, maybe a Nightmare Pain, or even 1 copy of Super Poly. Personally, I think this setup works well. It works good enough for getting what you need, and it has enough draw power and search power to search the cards that you need. So you don't really need Foolish Burial, but it's definitely a good choice. Geist Grinder Golem. We have enough OTK potential in the form of the Sacred Beast, in the form of Haman, and Yubel herself can deal a lot of damage. Same with our Link monsters, so Geist Grinder, we didn't really need him in this deck, and it didn't help with the strategy at all. Pot of Extravagance is a good card, but we do want to keep our Skeldreads, we do want to keep our Yubel, and I would rather have Desires because it's just so much better, and we can run it with Mature Chronicle. We don't need another copy of Eternal Favorite. Originally I had 2, I like to run 2, but with this version of the deck, don't really need 2 copies, 1 is perfectly fine. So that is all for this deck. This is the Sealed Nightmare Yubel Sacred Beast Exodia. Again, if you want to see this deck in action, click the card that's a little eye symbol above, or it might be over there. It really depends who's editing this video. I mean, one of them doesn't know to flip me around and point me towards the cards are, whereas the other one does. So, in one of these top corners, there's an eye symbol, and you can click it to find more videos, including this deck in action. Let me know what you would change with this deck. Again, another option is, of course, Terraforming works well in the deck too. I just never really needed it. got Fallen Paradise enough as it was. Let me know what changes you will make to this deck. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you try this out for yourself. It is a lot of fun with 3 win conditions. You've got Yubel, Super Poly, Sacred Beast, just damage, and of course, Exodia himself. So even if you lose Exodia with this deck, that's the big problem with Exodia decks, is you could lose them. But even if you do, you don't need them. You can always win with. And of course, my phone decided to update, or ask to update, immediately as I was ending the video. So thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name has been Senkara, and until next time, see ya. That was really poor timing for the phone update. Seriously, Samsung, get your shit together. Oh my goodness.